This is Back Roads of Illinois server to farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and the Midwest. Today's edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were bringing you lasted for farming sources and information sponsored by AgriGold. We're glad you're here on today for our program. I'm Cesar Delgado on today. This weekend is going to be the livestock judging by for her, and last weekend of the state fair in Springfield for this weekend. Otherwise, I'm with Jay Wheeler for Pro Harvest Seeds in Streator, Illinois. Jay is an agronomist with Pro Harvest Seeds in Central Illinois. And then, well, next week will be crazy time for the crop tour for early next week in Minnesota, Nebraska, Illinois, Iowa, South Dakota as well. We were talking about that with Christina vanahn from Vanahn and Company. This been Back Roads of Illinois. I'm with Jay Wheeler for Pro Harvest Seeds in Streator, Illinois. Jay is an agronomist with Pro Harvest Seeds in Central Illinois. Jay, how are you?
I'm doing very good today.
Great to have you for today.
Glad to be with you.
Jay, let's start with our conversation about updating on the season at Pro Harvest Seeds in Streator. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, would gladly to. Everything is looking really good. We've been having good rains, and fortunately, everything is progressing very well. We've been fortunate not having any tassel issues with our corn in the Pro Harvest lineup. We had good pollination, and really the beans are looking very good. Not much disease in either one, and seeing very good pod counts, and corn is ear counts and kernels and everything is looking real good. So we're really excited for this year. It's looking very well for us.
What is your thoughts on this crop for this growing season with the weather?
You know, it's been warm, but it's coming along good. It is a little ahead of schedule, not a lot like guys were thinking. I would say we're probably looking at maybe 3 to 5 days ahead of what we normally would be at, but not a large amount like guys were thinking. We've had some cooler days here now in the past, and really starting to get into that debt season, and things are just coming along nicely. I don't think it's going to be super early, and definitely not going to be late this year.
Yeah, soybean are really good. Do you agree with that?
Yes, soybeans are looking really good. Nice tall beans, seeing lots of pods. Just this week, I've started seeing a few other fields in my area. For some reason, it seems like conventional tilled, there's starting to be a little bit of sudden death. Not a lot of white mold I'm seeing, but I think sudden death is kind of starting to hit those tilled fields a little bit. Just this week I started seeing that, but luckily mine and some others around the no-tilled fields are still looking real good.
Of course. How is the cover crop trail for this year with the heat?
So with the heat, it's really standing out. From what I've seen, it's been looking wonderful. Where I've had the cover crop, I with this heat, I've really not seen the corn curling up in the heat or the beans having as much stress. And when I go out into the fields where I've had cover crop, I'm actually seeing 10 to 20 degrees cooler soil than in the conventional tilled fields and our dark black fields, which, man, when you can drop that soil temperature 10 to 20 degrees in this heat, that crop just loves it. And boy, the cover crops are just shining this year really well in that aspect, and looking even better than everything else.
What about cereal rye? Could you tell us about that with the weather?
So yeah, the cereal rye this year, we really didn't have hard, harsh winter. And so we still had a little bit of growth and had amazingly good growth throughout almost the whole winter. This spring was really nice. It was kind of cool in the spring. So it didn't really get out of hand. It didn't, try to bolt or go to seed real fast. It was very easy to control. It worked really well. And like I said, then we got that ground cover and it just kept our soils cool and worked out really well.
Sure. Can you tell our audience that what's latest seeds varieties of cover crop?
So of course, the most popular thing that you mentioned was the cereal rye. That's still kind of my number one go-to after the corn is harvested, head of beans. That's just the easiest to manage and the best thing that we still have out there. For the guys that are in CSP programs and government programs, a lot of them want a four-way mix. So, that bonus blend is working really well in that same aspect. And after corn, ahead of beans, it's got a four-way mix, which the government programs want. It has the cereal rye, it has the radish and the rapeseed and some barley in it. So those two are really been my top two, after corn, ahead of beans. And then seems like for beans, ahead of corn, our easiest and still number one go-to thing is the quick cover blend, which is the oats and radish, which will very easy management, will winter kill. You can go in the spring and do what you normally do without having anything out there, but we still get good growth in the fall, and get the benefit from the cover crop and that in the fall. And then, of course, the last thing that I really like using, but there again, it takes a little more management, is the secure blend, which is the annual rye and radish. But it seems like when you put it on in the beans and ahead of corn, you're planting your corn early. We're able to spray it fairly early. It's something that we can. I work with guys really close on keeping it managed and staying on top of it so we don't have escapes and it get out of hand, because a lot of guys are scared of the annual ryegrass, but if it's managed well, man, corn really likes that fibrous root system from it and really does well after the annual ryegrass radish blend. Corn just eats it up and loves it. So that's my top,
What do you
really my top
recommend for
things.
cover crop for this fall after the harvest season without the wheat, Jay?
So I would say cover crop, seeding for this fall. I still like I said, the cereal rye. Um, if you are in a program, that bonus blend. Um, really two things for the corn, and if we're trying to get stuff seeded into beans, the other thing with the soybeans, it seems like I do get a better stand um, getting the seed put on when the beans are just starting to turn, because by the time we harvest those beans, it's too late and we don't get enough growth in the fall. So really, it's got to be put on when the beans are just starting to turn, which is normally that first to second week of September is the ideal time frame to do that. And we've been pretty fortunate. I know the um, weather has been good. We've been getting rains, and I really, think that would be my go-tos for this fall.
Where people can find you for your consulting services for their cover crop.
Yes, definitely. So you can find me on the Pro Harvest website, which is proharvestseeds.com. You can email me at jw at proharvestseeds.com, or you can give me a call. My number is 815-712-8246.
Thanks, Jay.
Yes, thank you. Wonderful visiting with you today.
This is Jay Wheeler for Pro Harvest Seeds in Streator, Illinois, on back roads of Illinois. Well, next week will be crazy time for the crop tour for early next week in Minnesota, Nebraska, Illinois, Iowa, South Dakota as well. We were talking about that with Christina vanahn from vanahn and Company. Hey, Christina, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Kristen, what is your thoughts on these crop tours to compare from the Department of Agriculture?
Yeah. So, when you look at it, we had the USDA crop report this week, and it was, I've been doing this since 2009, and I think it was probably one of the most bearish corn reports I've ever been part of. Now, if you would have told me beforehand that USDA was going to add over 1 billion bushels of corn into the production pipeline and we would be able to close positive on the week, I would have never believed it. And that's what we were able to do. So I do think that coming into this report, everyone was so bearish. That even though we got a really bearish report, much more bearish than people were expecting, you were able to build off of that to a degree. And so I thought that was really neat that corn was able to fight back, get back above $4 on a close. I think that's huge. Next week we have Pro Farmer, and so that's going to offer us a ton of information when we look at that. But overall, I'm not thrilled, but I have to say I'm happy the way corn was able to perform after that crop report.
What was your thoughts with the yield is higher from the Department of Agriculture? Do you have any thoughts on it? Some traders are concerned about these numbers on Tuesday.
Yeah, that yield is ginormous. 188.8. That is such a huge yield. I get it. I get, everywhere. You don't really have anywhere short on moisture right now. Everything looks fantastic. The satellite imagery is going to look fantastic. You also just have farmer survey. I think farmers in general are very optimistic about the crop that they have out there. So I can get where that yield came in so high. I just have a couple issues with it. I mean, it's such a big yield in the first place. That's going to take a lot of work. We know that there's been, higher temperatures through a lot of places. And I wonder how that affected pollination. And then, we had a little bit of a rocky start in parts of Minnesota as well. It seems like we've been able to catch up, but I still have some concerns of those. One other thing to note when it comes to the yield is the higher the acre number, the harder it is to get a higher yield just because those fringe areas. And what we did see was USDA increased acres for corn in a lot of the Western Corn Belt, Dakotas, I think it was Kansas, parts of Minnesota. And that just makes me think it's going to be even harder to be able to get that yield. What we do know is that obviously Pro Farmer next week, but then the September report from USDA actually includes boots on the ground, where this one is just satellite imagery and farmer survey. And so that yield in September could be a lot different than what we have now, but time will tell.
Yeah, this growing season is normal with the rains, but it was pretty bullish from Tuesday.
Yeah, I just think that this market's doing a good job. Like on the chart, corn looks fantastic on the chart, got beyond two standard deviations, hit a quant, really came back below $4 and then came back to close. So honestly, I do feel really good about the corn market. However, just given the dynamic of just how much crop is out there now. Not only how much crop is out there, but USDA is factoring in a gigantic demand number at this point to offset some of those, additional bushels. That I just feel like corn's going to have an uphill battle for a little bit unless we could get some sort of trade agreement.
Sure. I saw the cattle auction from last week in Kansas and Iowa online. Of course, I can't say actually be in those areas, but how concerned about the cattle markets for right now?
Yeah, cattle completely scare me. It's such a roller coaster. One day you're down $9 in feeders, the next day you're up $6, and that is a ride that I don't want to be on. And so I just think it's so important to be layering some risk protection, whether that's LRP, whether that's puts in the account, because I'm just so fearful that eventually you'll be able to, get a decent sized correction in this market and it's not going to be fun. And we know cattle have the tendency to be able to lock limit when they really want to move. So I am very concerned about that. I think layering in puts should be a top priority if you have cattle. It did get a bounce today to finish off the week. I think that had to do with the fact that Ag Secretary Collins kind of sounded like they would continue to have that shutdown on the border for cattle for quite some time as they continue to work on the screwworm issue.
What concerns about the consumer budget with beef prices at grocery store?
Yeah, I've had some of those concerns for a while, but man, it just seems like they don't really want to stop buying beef. And so at this point, I think you just got to trust the demand. But it should be a concern in the back of everyone's head, of what would happen if consumers shut off demand. But so far, it just hasn't seemed like they've done that yet.
Finally, what is your thoughts on this crop in Minnesota and fundamentals on the cattle markets?
Yeah, the fundamentals we know are very friendly, right? We know that there's inventory issues. It's not going to be something that's really a quick fix by any means. So we know that story is friendly and is there. However, eventually, the old saying goes, you have to continuously feed a bull, and we know that information. So it's got to be new news. We've had that new news with imports being shut off from Brazil due to tariffs, or the border in Mexico being shut down. So we've had these friendly stories overall for cattle. I just worry that, how much more friendly information can we get? And sometimes fundamentals don't matter as much as they normally do. They take a backstage.
Where people can find you for your consulting services for their grain marketing and livestock markets in the Red River Valley.
Yeah, the easiest way is just give us a call, which is 1-800-648-5494.
Thanks, Christina. I enjoyed our conversation for today.
Thank you.
This is Christina vanahn from Vanahn and Company on Back Roads of Illinois. I am Cesar Delgado. You have a great